Isn't it funny how beautiful a phrase calm before the storm really is? Because for some of these college football teams, that phrase could not be any more true. Welcome back to the Any Given Saturday podcast because anything can happen on any given Saturday in this beautiful game of college football. Just talk to maybe your local sports fan that witnessed their team lose when they were a 30 to 35 point favorite on the betting websites. We are down here in a rainy Dayton, Ohio, as we are just a couple of days out for the college football weekend, at least for the main slates. We already have some Conference USA action that happened last night and more to come later this week. For those of you that are just absolute sickos for college football that care more than just a casual drive-by matchup than I do. But we do have a great podcast. Once again, as we are here, we are going to preview each of the top 25 games that are going to be happening over the course of this weekend. And not only are we doing that, what we're also going to do is we are going to wrap up the Wendy's 4 for 4 special here tonight. I'm going to give you my best bets for this upcoming weekend. Both of them could be on Saturday. Both of them may or may not involve the top 25 matchups that we're going to talk about here tonight. But I am so excited to dive into these top 25 matchups here in this specific pod. I hope you guys are as well. If you are, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button for me, because what that does when you take the few seconds out of your day to hit that like button, you tell me first and foremost that, hey, you enjoy this content. And then also on top of that, it gets this video out to more college football fans like yourself. So I would truly appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. And you see that we're not that big of a YouTube channel right now. So you have a real opportunity to be an A1 since day one. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well, because that would truly help me out from the bottom of my heart as we try to grow our very own college football community. That's for the people, by the people, because I'm certainly not going to run away from trying to talk about small conference things. Small conferences need love too. It's not always about the Power Five here on the Any Given Saturday channel. But that being said, 4 top 25 matchups this upcoming weekend. Now let's go to the college football slate as maybe we had a couple of weeks ago, where we ended up seeing 6 top 25 games happening on the same day. It felt like it was absolute madness. One of the greatest college football weekends of all time, but we still have a really good college football weekend. Even some other games that, while they don't feature top 25 teams, I still think we're going to get some good action, and I still think we're also going to get some questions answered in terms of maybe that coveted college football playoff hunt. We're now in October, so feel a little bit safer in terms of actually talking about the college football playoff hunt. And speaking of that college football playoff, first game, the very first game that I wanted to talk about, this game is going to have some absolute haymakers, could have a huge impact on the college football playoff down the line. We got to start with one of the best neutral site games in all of college football. We got to rock with the Red River rivalries presented by Allstate. This, of course, is going to kick off your college football action. It's going to be kicking off at noon over on ABC to kick things started. Oklahoma and Texas, once again, going to go at it. Texas, they do have the lead in this series. Texas does have a 63 to 50 advantage over the Oklahoma Sooners. This is considered a top 15 matchup, but I think, according to the Any Given Saturday power ratings, I think this should be a top 10 matchup, to be honest with you guys. Both these teams have been playing at an extraordinarily high level right now. Both teams coming into this matchup 5-0. Texas, their most important win on the road against Alabama, and they are also coming off of another top 25 win against the Kansas Jayhawks. And while Oklahoma hasn't been as tested as the Texas Longhorns, they have handled their business in their own right, being able to win in a multitude of different ways, sometimes leaning on their offense, such as when they put 66 up on Tulsa, or most recently, Iowa State putting up 50 against the Iowa State Cyclones. They also put up 73 against Arkansas State, but that was more of an expected result. But sometimes they've been able to lean on their defense, even in times when maybe the offense hasn't been humming or maybe hasn't clicked on every single level, such as the SMU game or the Cincinnati game, a game that I personally intended, and I personally gotten a chance to go ahead and watch, where they only put up 48 points in those two games combined. So what's at stake? What is at stake here between these two particular squads? Not only national implications, but these two teams are still in the Big 12 as of right now. This is the last season that these two teams will be in the Big 12 after this college football season. This rivalry game will be considered an SEC matchup. Not a huge fan of it, and that has been documented many times, but it is what it is at this point. We're also starting to get to, like I said, that college football playoff, and this is going to have college football implications as well, because this is the first time. This is actually the first time that we've seen these teams undefeated going into this particular matchup since 2011. And I'm a full-grown adult now, but the last time that's happened, that I was a freshman in high school, and I was certainly a lot different back in the early 2010s than I am today. So that's a big consideration. So winning this game is going to give whoever wins this game an inside track to make it to the Big 12 championship, because both for Texas and also for Oklahoma, this is going to be their toughest games of the season. For both Texas and Oklahoma, I'm looking at their schedules initially, and I really do see Texas being favored in every single game after this. Same thing could be said for Oklahoma. I could see them winning possibly every single game after this, or at least they'll be favored. But whoever does win this game, they do get a little bit bigger of a margin of error because of how like the tiebreakers works in the event that Oklahoma and Texas do still somehow finish with these similar records, the same records in conference play. That could certainly happen in a 9-game schedule. So we have that. We got Big 12 implications. We also have national championship implications. And we're also going to find out how good is Oklahoma. Oklahoma may be 5-0 right now, but ranked number 12 in the country. This might be a situation where maybe the perception of what Oklahoma was last season is playing into the consideration with how they're being ranked this year. Because let's face it, Oklahoma had an extremely down season last year. Ended up going 6-7. That is very below expectations. That is not the standard that is at place at the University of Oklahoma. So that's fresh in a lot of people's minds. We're going to see how good this Oklahoma team is. Now, here's what I'll say about Oklahoma, okay? This Oklahoma team, while they haven't played the most impressive teams as of yet, they are 5-0 against the spread. So every time that they stepped on the field so far this season, they have covered the spread thus far this year. Texas hasn't completely been able to do that. They're a little bit less, 3-2. They weren't able to cover against Wyoming or Rice, but they should be able to get up for this game too. Because like I said earlier, for Texas, this is going to be the biggest game of the year. With that being said, what is going to be that big time matchup? What's to really watch out for in this Red River rivalry? What is going to really decide it? It's going to be, can the Oklahoma defense keep Quinn Ewers contained in the pocket? We know how dangerous of a passer he's been this year. 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. But maybe what hasn't been talked about nearly as much is just how dangerous he has been on the ground this season as well. While his rushing numbers his rushing numbers might not be the most impressive, okay? So his running numbers so far this year, 25 carries, 74 yards. Not necessarily the most eye-popping in terms of rushing yards for a quarterback, but he does have 5 rushing touchdowns so far this year. He has found the end zone on the ground in every single game, with the exception of that Alabama game. And he's been able to rip off a couple of big runs as well when he does scramble outside the pocket. He's got a 29-yard run, for example, against Baylor. He also had a 30-yard run in their most recent matchup against the Kansas Jayhawks as well. So not only has Quinn Ewers continued to develop as a passer, he's actually having a significantly better passing season than what he did in his first year starting at Texas. This was, of course, a guy had a good season, not a great season because of injuries, but Quinn Ewers has taken that step forward as a passer, but he's also going to get done on the ground. He's been shown that ability to be that dual threat quarterback for the Texas Longhorns. So if with all the weapons that Texas does have, and it's well beyond Quinn Ewers, can the Oklahoma defense keep Quinn Ewers, at least make him a little bit more one-dimensional? And that defense is going to be led by Danny Strutzman. Danny Strutzman, he's a linebacker, true junior out of Windermere, Florida. He's leading this team in tackles as of right now. He leads the team in sacks. He's also been able to force a couple of turnovers, got an interception, has a fumble recovery as well. Danny Strutzman, he is the leader of this Oklahoma defense that has been playing at a higher level. And keep in mind, Brent Venables, he is a defensive-minded coach as well. So I'm sure he's going to be well involved in the defensive game plan this upcoming week. That's certainly something to watch out for. Can Oklahoma force Quinn Ewers to at least be one-dimensional? We'll just have to wait and see, because this Oklahoma defense has not been tested like it's about to be tested this weekend. And while it's not a road game, it's also not a home game as well. Those neutral site games could always be a little bit tricky. Other players to watch out for in this particular ball game. We'll start out with the underdogs. We'll go to Oklahoma. Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel is going to have himself a day. We didn't necessarily see him in the game last year. This was a guy that actually missed the Red River rivalry last year because he was dealing with a concussion and he was not cleared at the time. That was a big reason why Oklahoma was routed 49-0 last year. Dillon Gabriel didn't play, and their backup quarterback got absolutely crushed. Texas shown to be a physical team, more physical than what people give him credit for last year, and that physicality has continued for this Texas squad as they progress through the season. But Dillon Gabriel is healthy. He's healthy again, and Dillon Gabriel, listen, you could think that Quinn Ewers is a better quarterback than Dillon Gabriel, but there might not be as big of a gap as maybe folks would realize. Gabriel is quietly having a really good season as well. Almost 1,600 yards himself, 15 touchdowns. Did throw a couple of interceptions. I think he might have threw an interception against my Bearcats. I will never apologize for being a Cincinnati Bearcats fan. But that being said, this Oklahoma team is different when Dillon Gabriel is on the field. They're a more dynamic offense. The Texas linebacker, Jalen Ford, he calls him the head of the snake. So, I mean, you know what Texas is thinking about too, trying to shut down Dillon Gabriel, because he too is a little bit of a running threat as well. Maybe not as dynamic as Quinn Ewers, but he knows a thing or two about when it's a 3rd and short or when they're down by the goal line. He can put it inside the end zone himself if need be, although he does prefer to be someone that likes to pass the football. As for Texas, besides Quinn Ewers, we also got to take a look at Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks, he's been on a tear in the last few games. He's been running for over 100 yards in 3 consecutive games. He's also currently leading the Big 12 right now in terms of rushing yards. He has over 500 yards on the ground. He's averaging, 110, 120 yards a game? I mean, it's astronomically high. Texas, you maybe think of Texas and the first thing you think of is, the Flash with Steve Sarkisian. But they can run the ball too. They're a very physical group. And that physicality could very well dictate how this game turns out. And if they're able to turn it into a more physical game, I could see Texas winning this football game. Now, we'll go ahead. We're going to check out what you've been watching it on screen the entire time in the preview on this little graphic that we made. So we see the line. I saw it as of this afternoon. I'm recording on God, the time has flied past. October 5th. We're recording as of October 5th. So the line right now is 5.5. However, the Any Given Saturday power rating model thinks that the wrong team is favored. The model thinks that Oklahoma should be favored at -6. Now, you could scoff at that all you want, but that being said, the model has predicted who's won correctly over 70% of the time. So do what you want with that information. We are not betting on the spread of the Texas and Oklahoma game. We're not going to do that. We might sprinkle something on the over, which we might talk about a little bit later. We'll see what happens with the best bets. But what do I think is going to happen? Who do I think is going to win this game? That's a tough call. That is truly a tough call. I was thinking about it all day while I was at work today. I was thinking about it while I was at while I was driving to and from work. And I don't even know. I'm about to give my answer, but I don't know if I'm going to be fully convicted in this answer, right? I'm going to side with the model. I think Oklahoma is going to pull a slight upset. They're going to take down Texas in the Red River rivalry, get revenge from that 49-0 victory from last season, because I think this Oklahoma team is a different team than what we saw last season. I think that this Oklahoma team, because they have been able to win in a multitude of different ways, I think that Oklahoma can find a way to win this game. I think they can pull the upset off. But that being said, they got to pull away before the fourth quarter, before that fourth quarter starts. Because Sarkisian, you are what you are intentional about. That's what he said earlier this year. Texas has been one of the best fourth quarter teams in the entire country. So if Oklahoma's going to pull this out, you do not want to be close with the Texas Longhorns going into the fourth quarter. You need to be able to pull away in that third quarter, make it a double-digit lead. That's going to give them their best chance. I think they'll be able to do that because of how Oklahoma's been able to win in a multitude of different ways this year. I think Texas will make it close again in the fourth quarter, but I think Oklahoma hangs on and they beat the Texas Longhorns in that Red River rivalry, or as some Texas fans, I've seen them call it, the Red River Showdown. I prefer the former instead of the latter. But speaking of that southern part of the country, oh boy, do we have a lot of good football happening down south. That's for sure. We talked about how Oklahoma and Texas, well, they're going to be going into the SEC after this year. Well, let's actually go ahead and talk about the actual SEC moving forward. And the SEC will have multiple top 25 matchups in their conference this upcoming weekend. But let's start with the one that's going to be happening the earliest. At the same time that the Texas and Oklahoma game is happening, we'll have another noon kickoff. This one is going to be on ESPN following the conclusion of ESPN's College Game Day. We got number 23, LSU. Tigers are still ranked in the top 25 in spite of having multiple losses already. They're the only top 25 team in the AP poll that does have 2 losses. And then they take on a Missouri team. This Missouri team is 5-0, but how legitimate is that Missouri 5-0? Let me take a look at this Missouri schedule real quick. I'm going to read it top to bottom in terms of who they played. They've played South Dakota. They played a close one against Mid-Tennessee State. That was a home game. And for context, Mid-Tennessee State just dropped to 1-5. 1-4 or 1-5. Let me do a discount double check. Make sure I'm reading this correctly. So Mid-Tennessee State is 1-5 because they did just lose to Jacksonville State last night. Missouri barely beat that team. They do have a good win against Kansas State, 60-plus yard field goal, a walk-off. Model really likes that win. We still have Kansas State ranked in the top 25 in our power rating model, even though same could not be said for the AP poll. Then they got a 7-point win over Memphis in a neutral site. Then they opened up conference action, did what they were supposed to do. They beat Vanderbilt by 17. So that leads to Missouri. They're in the top 25 for the very first time this season. They're ranked number 21. So it does constitute this being a top 25 matchup, obviously. This is only the 4th time that these two teams have played. And interesting enough, Missouri actually also has the edge here too. So in the first 3 meetings of this series between these two teams, Missouri does have the 2-1 edge. Both of those wins coming early on in Missouri's tenure when they were making the transition from the Big 12 to the SEC in the early to mid 2010s. But what is truly at stake here? This is not necessarily a game that has the solid same college football playoff implications as what we saw for the Red River rivalry, because LSU already has a couple of losses. So unless there's an extreme amount of chaos and LSU is able to run the table, they go to Atlanta and they win the SEC championship. Unless there's a lot of chaos too, LSU is out of the playoff. Missouri, they're still very much in it. They're 5-0. They're still undefeated. Undefeated SEC teams are always going to get a little bit more love, at least from the national media, at least specifically ESPN. Yeah, I'm looking at you for that little bit of bias there. But LSU, even when we want to talk about the SEC, they really, I'm being dead serious too, they really need to run the table. And even then, it might not be enough to go to the SEC championship if you really think about it. That's because their only loss that they have in conference play, LSU is 2-1 in conference play right now. It's that 55-49 game that we saw last weekend against Ole Miss, where both defense ended up going on vacation. We see how it is. So if Ole Miss runs the table, it doesn't matter what LSU does from here on out because Ole Miss is going to have the tiebreaker. And, this LSU team, while I don't think Missouri is as talented as what that 21 ranking is, I mean, this is certainly going to be a motivated team. Missouri has a chance to go 2-0. And either Georgia or Kentucky, who's ahead of them right now by a half game because Missouri has played one less conference game than both of these teams. Missouri does have a chance to really assert themselves into that SEC East championship race, that divisional title action, because they'll play against Georgia. They'll play against Kentucky later on this year too. So a win for Missouri gets them to 6-0. And which, by the way, Missouri, you want to talk about a big stat for Missouri? This is the first time that Missouri has gone 5-0 since 2013. They ended up starting 7-0 that year and won the SEC East. So the last time that they started a year on a 5-game winning streak, Missouri has gone to Atlanta. Something to really think about there. So what's going to be the key matchup? What is going to be the biggest key in this one? It starts with the LSU passing attack going up against that Missouri secondary. I truly believe after what we have seen through the course of this season, Jaden Daniels, I think legitimately, he is the best quarterback in the SEC. I don't know if it's that close either. I truly don't. Because Jaden Daniels, it's not his fault that LSU has lost multiple games. Jaden Daniels has thrown for 1,700 yards, 16 touchdowns, has 2 interceptions to his name as well. He had a big day against Ole Miss as well. Over 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's against Ole Miss too. So Jaden Daniels he's a gamer, man. He can play. He will be an NFL quarterback. Mark it down. The dude is absolutely phenomenal. Now, that being said, Missouri's secondary has also got some guys as well. Most notably in that secondary, they got Chris Abrams-Draine and Ennis Rakestraw. They're two of the some of the premier defensive backs in the entire SEC. But it's not about those 2 defensive backs specifically. It's about their safeties. Their safeties certainly have had some trouble in the pass defense this season. And LSU, well, they like to have some fun with those explosive plays as well. So that secondary for Missouri, that secondary is really going to be tested this upcoming Saturday. Thankfully, they do have home field advantage, but because they're going to need all the help that they can get. But what other players are to watch in this matchup between LSU and Missouri? And for me, it's about the receivers. We're going to see 2 big-time receivers in this matchup, possibly 2 of the best wide receivers in the SEC. Malik Neighbors, for example, he's a wide receiver for LSU. He might be the I don't want to say that. I don't know. He's not the number 1 receiver in the country. That belongs to Marvin Harrison Jr. And if you don't believe that, I need to figure out what you're smoking and get some of that. But Malik Neighbors is certainly probably the best wide receiver prospect for the NFL in the SEC. He's got that elite speed, goes some really sure hands and versatility, and he lines up in multiple spots as well. The LSU coaching staff does a great job of really lining him up in different places. They'll line him up in the slot. They'll line him up out wide as well. He had a big game last week against Ole Miss. He had over 100 yards in that game against Ole Miss in that absolute shootout. And overall in the year, over 600 yards, got 5 touchdowns already. He has been unguardable practically. The only exception being that Florida State game, but other than that, he's been at or very close to 100 yards in each game that he's played in. Only other exception being Grambling State, but he got pulled early from that game because it was an absolute blowout. So I'm wondering how Missouri is going to contain Malik Neighbors, because if you're going to win this game, what you can't have happen is Malik Neighbors go off. You can't have him be exposed to the safeties. So I'm curious if either Chris Abrams-Draine or Ennis Rakestraw, one of those 2 guys shadows Malik Neighbors throughout the course of the game. Because I think those 2, at least in certain spots, could guard him one-on-one. But even then, I think Malik is going to get, he's going to get his. But can you make him work hard enough to where, like the juice isn't always worth the squeeze? Now, we'll go to the opposite side. we'll go to that Missouri sideline. They got a really good wide receiver too. Louisville Burden III. He's the only wide receiver that's actually ahead of Malik Neighbors in terms of total yards this year. Might not be considered as good of an NFL prospect, but like, dude's a certified baller. He's got that dog in him too. He has almost 650 yards already through 5 games. And he's had 100 yards in every game except that South Dakota game. But he's gotten steadily better as the season has gone on. And he was already a pretty good receiver to begin with. That's the crazy part in this too. Yeah, it's like he certainly would have gotten, I would think, that 100-yard mark if he was able to stay in the game longer against South Dakota. But as South Dakota, I totally understand too. And in case you guys haven't noticed too, the LSU pass defense, that pass defense is it is a little on the suspect side. You want to talk about how down bad this defense has been, or at least that they've allowed? If I can even, oh my goodness, where can I find? I just saw it just recently too. Okay, here we go. Yards allowed. LSU has allowed over 250 yards passing. And they were also exposed mightily in that game against Ole Miss. You want to know how many yards they gave up specifically in that Ole Miss game? They gave up over 700 yards of offense, 400 yards passing, essentially. We rounded up, but they had over 400 yards passing. They couldn't get a single turnover. They had to go into the transfer portal to get these pass defenders, and that has not worked out. That has really held back the LSU team as a whole, their inability to really stop the pass defense. So, and Missouri's got a solid quarterback. Brady Cook, he is a solid quarterback for Missouri, and he's got a great receiver in Louisville Burden III. So we're going to have to get the Brady Cook. The LSU front seven has to apply pressure to Brady Cook, because if he's allowed to cook, it could be a long day for LSU, and it's going to be one of those things where LSU is going to have to put up 40, 45 points in order to win the game. And that's just not sustainable even in today's college football. You can't do that on a consistent basis. You just can't do it. So we'll see. We'll check the model. We'll check the any given Saturday line. Right now, as of this afternoon, LSU is a 4.5-point favorite. Any given Saturday model is a -12. And I do think that this is a little bit closer to what the model thinks and maybe what Vegas thinks more so, because I don't think Missouri has been tested. And they're going to be tested. And for me personally, I don't think, even though they're 5-0, I don't think that Missouri is actually a top 25 team. I don't. I think Maryland, for example, should be ranked ahead of this Missouri squad. I think like a team like that should be ranked ahead of Missouri. So I do think that Missouri is going to get exposed in this game, and I think LSU wins somewhat convincingly in order to get back on track, and they get some positive momentum as we get into the second half of the season. So we're gonna go with the LSU Tigers, and we're gonna go with them covering the spread as well. Man, that's a lot to dive into. Oh, we gotta get that water. Gotta stay hydrated. It's been really warm in Dayton. I don't know if it's been warm for you guys as well, in your respective parts in the country. But it's been warm, and gotta make sure I have a voice for the whole thing. So we gotta take a quick drink from my favorite glass. And now we dive into some of these later games that are going to be happening on Saturday night. We don't have any top 25 games in the 3:30 slate, but then at 7 o'clock, we got a couple more big time games that do have a direct impact on the top 25 because we do see two teams playing against each other multiple times in the late night special primetime television. Kentucky just got themselves ranked to in the AP poll for the first time. They did it because they beat Florida pretty convincingly, actually. They beat Florida at home 33-14. Florida had to get some points in garbage time to make it not as bad as what it really was. So Kentucky is in the top 25 for the very first time. We've had them power rated for quite some time now. I think we might have Kentucky in the top 15, top 20 ourselves. And they're taking on a Georgia team. And this Georgia team, two-time defending champions, they're the number one team in the entire country, at least according to the AP poll. And they have a 22-game winning streak active as of right now. However, looking at this Georgia Bulldog squad, they really haven't been as impressive. It's just clear that this is not the same Georgia team that we saw the last couple of years. I mean, they struggled against South Carolina. South Carolina, mind you, almost allowed literally double-digit sacks against North Carolina in the opener. Then in their road game against Auburn was in the lead going into the fourth quarter. They needed to make a comeback happen in order to ultimately win the game. Now, they were able to do that, but at the same time, man, Georgia has been a little too close for comfort in their first couple of games. And now they're back at home and they have a top 25 opponent. I think this is the first time in a little bit that we actually seen a top 25 team go into Athens, Georgia. Because, well, I guess, except with Tennessee last year, but hasn't been a lot of premium home games in Athens, Georgia. That's going to change here. Kentucky ranked number 20. And this game does have big implication as well. We're talking about an opportunity to put yourself in the driver's seat to win the SEC East, because these two teams right now, they are tied for first in the SEC East. So whoever wins this game, not only is it going to be a nice boost to the resume, but also they'll get that inside track to go to Atlanta. And that's big right now because I'm looking at the landscape of the SEC right now. I don't think you could look at any team at this current moment, either in the East Division or in the West Division, and say to yourself, that's a lock to go to Atlanta. I think Alabama is starting to separate itself a little bit over in the West, but Georgia, while they've been undefeated, they haven't looked great in doing so. They've struggled to cover the spread. I don't think they've covered the spread once. So that tells you how Vegas feels about this Georgia team right now. So the line has it as Georgia. That being said, Georgia is still a 2-touchdown favorite over Kentucky. So with a spread that's a little bit bigger, how does Kentucky pull off this upset? We got the obvious. You got to win the turnover battle, right? You have to win the turnover battle, be effective in the red zone. I think we all know this, but what else? Devin Leary's got to show up, man. Devin Leary is going to have to show up and play well in this game because their main offensive weapon so far this year is Ray Davis. Ray Davis has been electric this season for the Kentucky Wildcats. Nearly 600 yards, 8 touchdowns. Most recently, he ran for 26, 280, and 3 scores. So I don't think they're going to get that much production out of Ray Davis. But in the event that Ray Davis can't get much going against the Georgia rushing defense, Devin Leary's going to have to show up. And Devin Leary's been fine, but he hasn't really had that breakout game, I would say. So far in SEC action, he's actually been pretty mediocre. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. In that Florida game, they're very fortunate that they didn't really need him. He was 9 for 19 for 69 yards. It's not that nice. It's not that nice at all. He found a little bit of groove in the second half, but it wasn't that nice of a game. His longest pass went for 12 yards. So I do think that Devin Leary is going to have to be more effective, because if he has a similar type of game in that Florida matchup, he does that against Georgia, they're going to key in on Ray Davis. And as is, Georgia, while it's not an elite rushing defense by any means, Bulldogs, they still have a solid rush defense. They average 113 yards on the ground, yards allowed per game. That's good for 37th in the entire country. So we'll see what Ray Davis can do. I think he's going to be a big focal point, but I think Devin Leary is really the big X factor in this one. If Kentucky is going to be able to pull this upset off. In addition, if Kentucky wants to go out, the other big thing for Kentucky to pull this win off is Kentucky has to find a way to contain Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, in the 5 games that Georgia has played so far this year, he has looked like the best player on the field so far. He's won the Mackey Award last year. And in that game against Auburn, listen, it was a good stat line and all. 8 catches, 157 yards, but particularly in that fourth quarter, in that final quarter where Georgia was able to finally put away the Auburn Tigers on the road, he had 4 catches for 121 yards in that final quarter alone. That's what I call taking over a game. So if you're Kentucky, you absolutely cannot allow Brock Bowers to do that to you. Make someone else, anybody else, beat you. Don't let Brock Bowers be that guy. Now, who could Kentucky turn to possibly stem the tide? Sorry if I was gonna cough, but that didn't happen. Maybe we need another drink from the water real quick. Oh, that feels so good. Maybe they could turn to someone like a Trevin Wallace. He's going to be motivated for sure. The Kentucky inside linebacker. He's returned to his home state, and he had a team high of 5 tackles for loss. He also has 3.5 sacks as well, and he also got his first career INT. So maybe like a Trevin Wallace is gonna have to stick with a Brock Bowers and just do what he can to keep up in coverage. Because if Brock Bowers is able to get loose, we're gonna have some problems. We are going to have some major problems. And historically, Kentucky has not succeeded against Georgia. In the series, Georgia 62-12 in their series together. Georgia has won the last 13 meetings between these two teams. The last time that Kentucky actually won in this series, you have to go all the way back to 2009. And that was when they beat Georgia 37-24. But other than that, Georgia has only lost 4 times against Kentucky at Sanford Stadium. And guess where this game is going to be? In Sanford Stadium. So, that being considered, Oh, and one more thing. Force Georgia to start slow again. Because if Georgia gets off to a fast start, they've been a team that's played better in the second half than the first half. But they have started really slow, particularly in the first quarter. Total this season, they've only scored 17 points in the first quarter. That's the same amount that they allowed in the first quarter defensively. So Devin Leary is going to have to show up because who knows what Ray Davis is going to be able to do against the Georgia rushing defense. Because I think that Ray Davis is a bad running back, but I do think that he's going to be the defensive focal point. We talked about Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers has to be contained and then force Georgia to start slow again because they are not as good as the first half team as they are in the second half. Now, we talked about the Vegas line already. It's a minus 14.5, but the model believes in Kentucky a lot more than what Vegas does. Still has Georgia as a favorite, but it's at minus 4.5. So what do we think? What do I personally think here? I don't think that this is the same Georgia team from the last couple of years. I think this is a Georgia team that has that's looked far more vulnerable than what we've seen them in the last couple of years. And listen, it's a hard to maintain top dominance in college football when you're losing. At least prior to the transfer portal being popular, you're losing 25 to 30% of your roster. It's probably more than that now as we move on this era of NIL, as well as the transfer portal becoming far more popular. I just think this is what Georgia is. I would think that, through the first month of the season, we would see Georgia flip that switch, and I just haven't seen it. So, I still think Georgia wins this game, but I do believe that Kentucky is going to cover. So we will agree with the model here once again. We'll go with Kentucky plus the points, but Georgia to ultimately win outright. We're going to lock that in. Final answer. And here's the crazy part too. You want to talk about big time matchups here in week number 6? This is not the only team in Kentucky that's ranked in the top 25 right now. Louisville just got themselves ranked in the top 25 as well. The Bluegrass State is doing pretty well for themselves in football season. Usually, if you want to see multiple teams in the state of Kentucky ranked in the top 25, you would have to wait until basketball season. But that's not the case here. So Louisville is undefeated. They're 5-0. But Louisville, who have they played? Who have they actually played so far? They really haven't played anybody. They beat Georgia Tech by 5, Indiana by 7, an FCS matchup. They did blow out Boston College, but their most recent game, defensive slugfest against NC State. They won by 3. That previous game that they played, the NC State game, that is the only team that Louisville has played that we currently have in our top 50 in terms of our power rating. So forget top 25. NC State is the only team in the top 50 that Louisville has played. So this is going to be Louisville's biggest game of the season. They'll have some other ranked games after this, but as of right now, this is the toughest game that Louisville will play this season. Notre Dame, on the other hand, I'm really curious to see what is the mentality of this Notre Dame team. Because this Notre Dame team, this would be their third top 25 matchup in a row. Notre Dame, they lost a heartbreaker to Ohio State. That was at home. Then they had to go on the road to take on Duke. That was a close game as well, 7-point game. And then now third top 25 game in a row. And listen, I think Notre Dame is the more talented team than what Louisville is. But also, at the same time, you're still talking about primarily 18 to 22-year-old kids. So there's more volatility than maybe what you would see in the NFL. So that's what I'm really curious about. How does Marcus Freeman get his guys mentally and emotionally ready to get up for this game again? Because trying to bring your A game, or at least like a B plus game, which I don't think Notre Dame necessarily needs to bring their A game to win, but they can't be sloppy either. Like Louisville, they're 5-0, and while maybe their 5-0 isn't as good as maybe other 5-0s in the country, Louisville can still play. I don't think they're ranked, but I think they can still play. I think they can give Notre Dame a tough time. All right, so if there's a little bit of a weird transition between that last point and now, so that was because I had to take my dogs out real quick. I want to make sure that they don't end up pissing themselves. Anyone that's a dog owner sure can completely understand that. But going back to what I was saying, interesting game here between Notre Dame and Louisville. But what precisely is at stake? Besides the obvious that is the college football playoff. Well, Notre Dame is actually looking for its 31st consecutive win over an ACC opponent. They extended to 30 games after they beat Duke on the previous weekend. College game day was down there. Big moment for Duke. And while Duke held their own for sure, they could not come out on top against Notre Dame. Louisville, on the other hand, another team that did just recently jumped into the top 25. First time this season that we've seen Louisville in the top 25. They're going to be seeking their first 6-0 start since 2013. And what Louisville is also attempting to do is that they are looking to break a 2-game losing streak that they currently have going against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now, what does Louisville have to its advantage? Well, Louisville does have history with the current quarterback of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They do have history with Sam Hartman. Sam Hartman played against this Louisville team last season, but it was not with the Notre Dame team that we see him on today. This was back when he was with Lake Forest, and he did throw for a decent chunk of yards, 271 yards, but got picked off 3 times, which is more interceptions than what Sam Hartman has thrown the entire season so far. 2 of those interceptions that he threw were returned for touchdowns, and Louisville was eventually able to rout Lake Forest 48-21. It left Hartman 2 of 3 in his attempts to beat Louisville. So Sam Hartman does have experience playing against this Louisville squad, but Louisville, conversely, has experience against Sam Hartman. And they're going to need that help too because, Sam Hartman's having a good year. 14 touchdowns. He has not thrown a single interception yet. And he's done it despite throwing over the 140 times. He's already has a school record for most consecutive passing attempts without throwing an interception. Louisville's passing defense is not the worst, though. It's not great. It's about middle of the pack in terms of where their pass defense stands within the ACC, but they did hold NC State to just 112 yards through the air. They got multiple sacks. They got multiple interceptions as well, including a clutch interception by Quincy Riley that happened with about 90 seconds left to play. Granted, it was when Brendan Armstrong was starting for NC State. He recently got benched for MJ Morris. He'll be taking over for NC State, at least in their next matchup against Marshall. But we've seen this Louisville defense step up in terms of their pass defensive capabilities. So we have seen that so far. Can they do it again, though? That'll be a big-time question. Can Sam Hartman continue to take good care of the football? Because as long as he takes really good care of the football, Notre Dame, of course, will have a really good shot of winning this game. But what else do we want to go ahead and keep in mind moving forward? How about the players to watch in this game? I think both of them got to go with the running backs in this game. Audric Estime, Estime. You could probably roast me down in the comment section over this, but this dude is a stud. Dude is really freaking good. I've seen him play multiple times this year. The Ohio State game. I've seen him play in the Navy game. Dude just pops off the screen. He plays great ball. Leading the nation right now in rushing yards, over almost 600 rushing yards, 700 rushing yards to this point, doing off of 95 carries, 7 touchdowns. Estime, he is averaging 7 yards a carry. So every time he gets the ball, he's almost guaranteed to pick up a first down. Now, last couple of games, 2 of the games that Notre Dame has played, 2 of their tougher games, he has not been able to put that same impact. Was held to 70 against Ohio State. He was held to 81 yards against Duke. Still good numbers, but not the eye-popping numbers that we saw early in September. What we saw against NC State or Central Michigan, for example, or their FCS matchup against Tennessee State either. So we'll see if he can find a rhythm once again. He did end up with a 30-yard scamper with 31 seconds left. That did get them over the top against Duke. And his 7.1 yards per carry also has him ranked in the top 10 in terms of all FBS running backs. That entails all 133 teams. Likewise, Jalard Jordan, the running back for Louisville, he's also nobody to slouch at either. Now, he was contained last week in that NC State game. He had just 32 yards on 16 carries. Disgusting. But we knew the NC State defense is a pretty nasty group overall. The question with NC State, can they get enough from their offense in order to really cement themselves as that dark horse contender to win the ACC? The answer has been resoundingly no. But their defense at NC State is really good. So those 32 yards on 16 carries, while it's not good. It's not good at all. At the same time, not the worst team to run just a couple of yards per carry on. He does lead the ACC, though, with over 100 rushing yards a game. He's the only running back in the ACC who's able to do that. And Jalard Jordan, he knows how to make the home run happen. He's a home run hitter. He leads the FBS right now with 3 separate scrimmage plays of over 70 yards. 2 of them came on the ground. And he's also someone that's ranked in the top 10, actually ranked higher than Audric Estime right now. He's currently 6th nationally, and he has a slightly higher yards per carry average of 7.3. The difference between him and Audric is that he doesn't have as many opportunities to run the ball, but this is also a dynamic running back in this particular matchup. He can hold his own against Estime in the one-on-one battle. So whoever is able to get their ground game going first, I think is going to have an advantage. I think we're going to get some good quarterback play. While Sam Hartman, I think, is the better quarterback in this matchup. Louisville's got a solid quarterback too. For those of you that don't know, Jack Plummer is the starter on this Louisville team. He's the transfer over from Purdue. He started at Purdue. He then transferred to Cal, and then he transferred from Cal all the way to Louisville. And Jack Plummer, pretty good quarterback in his own right. A solid quarterback, not a liquid or a gas. While Sam Hartman is the better quarterback, I think Jack Plummer can also make some plays if he's given enough time. But whoever can get their ground game going more so, I think is going to have the ultimate advantage in this game. And speaking of that advantage, we'll check the Vegas line. We'll check the any given Saturday line as well. So as of this afternoon, when I'm recording this, Notre Dame is a 6.5 point favorite at the present moment. However, the model is more high on this particular game. They have Notre Dame listed as an 11-point favorite in this game. So on paper, it makes sense with what Notre Dame has been able to do for the most part this year. I think Notre Dame's strength of schedule is certainly at a much higher level than what we've seen from Louisville. Okay. So, I think Notre Dame is a better team than Louisville, but I go back to that emotions part. I go back to that emotion parts in college football. You got 18 to 22-year-olds on the field. You're going to have more volatility. You're going to have a little bit more variance than maybe what you would see at the professional level. And even though on paper it would make sense to go with Notre Dame, I think that Louisville, I think because of those emotions, because I think it's just so difficult to get up for that many games in a row, that many top 25 ranked matchups in a row, I think Notre Dame is going to stumble. I think Notre Dame is going to be upset on the road against Louisville. We're not only picking Louisville to cover this spread, we're also going to pick Louisville to win outright. And I think we are going to see a field storming in Louisville, Kentucky, Saturday night. That is, of course, a 7:30 kickoff on ABC, but I think we're going to have a premium. I think Louisville is going to have something special here. I think they'll be remaining undefeated when the dust settles. I truly believe that. So that covers all of the top 25 matchups. And like I said, great weekend coming up. We are going to have Oklahoma versus Texas, LSU and Missouri in the early slot. And then for the nightcap, we got Kentucky and Georgia and Notre Dame and Louisville. So pretty excited overall about this college football weekend that's going to be happening for us soon. So, that being said, we started this with the previous pod. I gave a couple of my best bets for the Wednesday and Thursday, but now I want to jump into to wrap up the Wendy's 4 for 4 special. I want to really wrap up that I really want to wrap up the Wendy's 4 for 4 special. What are the best bets for Friday? So tomorrow, and also for Saturday. So I was looking at the games that are happening on Friday. There's a couple of games on Friday. I know Oklahoma State is playing against Kansas State. That's a Big 12 conference matchup. And then we also have yet another game on Friday. So there's multiple games on Friday for sure. Nebraska and Illinois is playing, but I didn't really like those games particularly, not even for over-unders. So I've faded Friday completely. The other two best bets that I have for you guys here tonight, they are both Saturday games. And ironically enough, they include games that we actually talked about earlier today. So we'll start with the early Saturday games. We talked about Oklahoma and Texas, top 15 matchup. While we're not going with the spread here, I'm going to go with the over of 60.5. These teams have both been extremely capable of putting points up on the board. I think this does end up being a shootout. This was originally at 59.5. It's up to 60.5, but we still like the over here. I do think this ends up being a shootout. I think this ends up being a classic, and I think they cover on the over there. And then likewise, Kentucky and Georgia. Also going with the over-under here. I'm going with the over of 47.5. Both offenses have been pretty solid. We've seen both Georgia and we've seen Kentucky average more than 25 points a game in their respective matchups in the SEC so far. I think this is a close game. I think this is a competitive game. And I think that's conducive to cover this 47.5 from an over standpoint, which is a little bit low in today's college football. You typically see games that are in the 50s most of the time. So just to recap, to lock up the Wendy's 4-for-4 special, we got Kentucky and Georgia going over at 47.5. And then we're also going to have Oklahoma and Texas with the over of 60.5. We're going to lock it in. And, we'll just hope for the best in terms of betting endeavors. These lines are based off of FanDuel. That's what I use for my sports gambling. I use FanDuel. That being said, if you do end up gambling, please be responsible. Don't bet money that you don't have. I think many of us know that. Just in case you don't, that's really important for you guys to know. So that is going to wrap things up here, guys. I think we're going to be just about an hour, I think. Looks like we're going to be about an hour. Good pod. Really loved it. When we come back with another pod early next week, she'll be able to get it out Tuesday morning since I'll actually have the Monday off. That's usually when I record, is on Mondays, because we got that Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day, depending on what you choose to celebrate. Either way, it is a federal holiday for me, so that is a day off. Bless up. So I'll get the next pod out Tuesday morning, and during that Tuesday morning, bare minimum, we'll always talk about a few games that surprised me the most from this college football weekend. But that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. If you made it through this entire thing, first and foremost, you're a real MVP, as Kevin Durant would say. Truly appreciate that. And if you haven't done it already, I know I talked about it before, earlier in the pod, but hit that like button for me. Hitting that like button for me, what that lets me know as a creator is that you actually enjoy this content. And also, at the same time, it gets the video out to more college football fans like you. We have a true opportunity to build a college football community from the ground up that not just cares about the Power 5, but cares about all aspects of college football. We have a true opportunity to do that. So if you believe in that vision, hit that like button and also hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. But with that being said, guys, I'm your host, Jake. Appreciate you guys once again if you made it to the end. But I will see you guys next time, as I will be taking the next few days enjoying some college football. We have football every day for the next 7 weeks. Can I get a hallelujah in the comment section? I'm certainly celebrating that. It's awesome that I have a significant other that enjoys watching football too. God is good, man. God is absolutely good. But I'm rambling. I'm starting to rambling, so I'm going to sign off. Hope you guys are out there having a good one. Enjoy the extended weekend if you have Monday off like I do. But with that being said, we're going to sign off. And I hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.